Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But KSJE is now listener supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast.
Welcome back to Right on Four Corners. I'm your host, DelSheree Gladden. I've got Chris Rugeley. So we're going to talk about your debut novel, Take Creek, for example. You have some interesting style and ideas through it that we're going to jump into in just a minute. Tell everyone a little bit about who you are, Chris.
To start, DelSheree, thank you so much for having me on, and thanks to all your listeners for tuning in and showing their support for the book. My name is Chris Rugeley. I am a novelist, a short story writer, and scribbler who has been working at this for quite a few years. And my first novel, which is called, as mentioned, Take Creek, for example, is coming out on October 1st. It's coming out with a very cool press called 713 Books, run by a wonderful human being and brilliant editor named Leland Chuck. I'm very grateful to him and everyone in his circle for what the press has done for me. And my background runs the gamut. I was born in Texas. I grew up in Colorado. I went to college in Montana. I traveled in and out of the country and around the country off and on for a number of years. And say in 2012, my wife and I ended up in San Francisco, and we ended up living in San Francisco full time for about 10 years. And have somewhat recently just kind of been dividing our time more between there and northern New Mexico and being back in the mountains and southern Rockies, which has been very, very lovely. This book was a couple years in the making and was initially accepted for publication like a couple of years ago now. So it's kind of been in the works for a long time, and I'm very excited to see it come forth into the world.
It can be a really long process that you have to be really patient through. And I think people who haven't been through that don't always realize you get a contract or you get an agent and then you're so excited and it's like, and now we wait a lot.
Yeah. There's so many things about all of the many possible steps of writing and becoming a writer or a published author or something that even if you had been told what all of these different possibilities were, I don't think there's a whole lot of ways for you to anticipate it. And so try to be humble and learn from each of the new experiences and grow to just become a better person and hopefully a better writer too. So.
That is a great way to look at it. Patience is one of those things that it's hard to have nowadays. Everything's so instant. And sometimes when we have to wait or work through that process, it's like, wait, what? I can't just do it or have it right now. And I'm seeing that a lot with some of my young students. But I think it's hard for adults too.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about that. Yeah, I think there's so many different things in our daily lives and in the culture just constantly vying for our attention that, it can feel like we're almost like in some kind of like attention crisis or something at times.
It does. That's a good word for it, attention crisis. I like that. Now, before we jump into questions, give people just a general overview of what Take Creek, for example, is about without giving too much away.
Sure. Take Creek tells the story of a starry-eyed, really blissfully minded, unnamed photography student who has dreams of one day making it big, I'll say. And as the novel opens, he's beginning his final year as a student at Take Creek, which is one of the most prestigious art schools in the world in the book, and never fully articulated, but more or less based off an environment in like the rural Northeast, like upstate New York. So the main character he's a photographer and he's studying under this kind of rogue professor named Salter. Was once an award-winning, an highly regarded American photographer, but is now just kind of like just waxing battle axe, like in behind a desk. And so the story basically unfolds with the narrator's final year and losing a bit of ground, it seems, having this kind of like sense of certainty of being like young and in control of things, and then this kind of mysterious new student arrives on campus one day, and it just kind of completely upsets the balance that everyone previously thought was there. And that kind of comes to a head as well when Salter, the main character's professor, assigns him to start surveilling this new student. And yeah, it just kind of kicks off this absurdist, very just kind of rambling and fun, unpredictable chain of events that kind of like mashes up a number of different kinds of styles and writers and different things that have done things based off like stories on campuses. So that was kind of my take on it, and that's the general pitch of the story.
Thank you for that. Where did the overall concept for this story come from? Because it's not your typical, here's the storyline and structure that everybody's used to reading in commercial fiction. You kind of take a different approach. So how did you, start putting the ideas together for this story?
I think that, it's funny when you work on something a long period of times, it can be somewhat cloudy, like trying to remember exactly where it all got started. But I know that for me, the very early, just kind of like sensorial parts of writing this were very much focused on like the setting and the place. And so that kind of like grew before a lot of the specifics related to the characters or anything else happening in the book. And there was just kind of this setting that just tried to render it like larger than life. And it's just extreme weather and this really kind of bizarre rural campus full of all of this kind of avant-garde artwork and these students kind of roaming around and abandoned all over the place, and kind of, I think, just trying to figure out what they want. Yeah, so for me, that world kind of started there, and then I think I kind of became fascinated with other kinds of colleges that maybe not necessarily art schools, but just kind of very, very small, like mission-driven colleges, and particularly in rural places, and just started reading about a lot of those different kinds of commitments and practices at these schools, and it just kind of started ballooning, and then there were characters, and that just and then it went out of control.
Sometimes, something strikes you and you just run with it and see where it goes.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was a lot of that with the instinct. So.
Well, that led you to some interesting places. I think what you said about the location and the setting being larger than life, that was something that struck me, where you're trying to be like, is this possibly a real place somewhere out there? That there's this campus like this that really is just this conglomeration of pieces and parts of kind of different projects in the history of the school that's manifested visually in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to take in the various parts of the campus and as you're describing it and trying to picture that in your mind, you're just like, I don't know if I can fit all these things together in one space.
Yeah, there was definitely a pull at many points along the way to just kind of to try to tease out those qualities that would make it kind of almost quasi too fantastical to be real, but at the same time to kind of like keep pulling it back so that it still was like very just like embedded in daily human life, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That became a kind of deliberate practice all the way down to like the actual sentence writing in spots, was to kind of like juxtapose certain kinds of more far-flung qualities and things about the place or a character with really just basic asinine things to follow it. Yeah.
You went back and forth between those well, and I think it did just create this interesting view of, especially like you said, like those smaller insular societies. They tend to get really weird after a while.
Yeah.
Not enough influence from the outside to kind of keep things close to mainstream.
Yeah, that was definitely is something that really fascinated me. I'm glad to hear that it comes through for a reader too, because I don't think that I have ever had any kind of particular experience like that. I suppose we all do in certain ways, as members of families and communities and circles of various backgrounds and orientations and many, many different identities and crossovers that, there are these kinds of things that these are the things in the world that simultaneously make us, but also give us a space to be free,
Yeah.
So, which seemed kind of fun to play with young artists as well.
It was an interesting setting for that, to see these really creative minds and they're existing in a space that gives them really a great deal of freedom. And how in some cases that was very liberating, and then in other cases it was a little too much. And
Yeah.
they struggled with going between those two extremes in some cases throughout the book.
No, I think that's a great observation. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's parts of all of the character development that it kind of oozed out of a lot of the other stuff I was doing was seeing how these characters would continue interacting with one another on the page and making decisions and living their lives, given all the absurdities happening constantly around them. So yeah, that was a big part of it for me. Absolutely.
And you notice that you carried that into, like you mentioned at one point, going sentence by sentence and juxtaposing those, that you took your writing style and you included different structures. At one point in the middle, it switches to these journal type entries, and you used the actual structure of what you were writing to present things in different ways. Tell me about that and how you went about making those decisions and then putting them together.
I think that first idea generated for that middle section you're talking about, which is called the Little Red Book, there's just kind of a way of spinning off this particular detail about one of the characters in the book is a character named Jersey. And Jersey always is said to be carrying around a little red book in his back pocket. It's just like a blank little notebook that he never writes in or never does anything with, but like it's always there. And I don't know why, it just, for some reason, is these kinds of random details that just kept coming back. And then it slowly became this kind of fun thing to play with in the middle of the book. And I didn't know if it was going to work or how how it would pan out in any way. But it was really fun to kind of change gears, and then also just have this kind of completely different lens of representing this experience between two of the main characters in the book, but in a completely different way from the regular kind of scenes in the chapters that precede it and follow it.
It was a surprise as a reader to turn the page and be like, oh, this is different. But it did provide an interesting break from the first half. And then when they come back from that trip, there's really a change in gears for what's happening and what the main character is experiencing. And I liked that it gave the reader a chance to kind of pull out and then have this different experience and then come back to the story. And it's like, oh, okay, like we're going in a slightly different direction now. Like things are starting to come together in a different way than you expected. And that was a unique way to, in a way, prepare the reader for something different's coming next. Like we're gonna take a slight turn and you're not gonna be sure where it's going, but keep following.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. I really appreciate you saying that, because I think sometimes if you try something on the page and maybe you think it's going to work, but it doesn't end up working, or you stick with something long enough and kind of keep tinkering with it and playing around with it to try to make it work. But yeah, I do know that in the kind of final parts of composing and editing that section, that for me it did start to solidify like the shape of things to come throughout the rest of the book and just kind of a change in mood. So I'm really happy to hear that came across. That's great.
And I love to see people trying different things. I've worked with a lot of writers and I used to coach ghostwriters, and it was so focused on convention.
Yeah.
Really, especially with the ghostwriting, like they were very strict on following the structure and the conventions and the styles, and like it really kind of boxed people in, honestly. But it can be a good learning experience for new writers to understand reader expectations. But it's really nice when people can break out of that. I'm going to try this other thing and see how it goes.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah, thank you for saying that, and it's a very generous observation. And I find that, conventions can sometimes be signposts and really fundamental structures in a piece or a work of art, but they can end up becoming hindrances to other instincts that are a little bit more confusing and difficult to play around with, but do have the possibility of maybe at some point being more rewarding, or at least rewarding in a different way.
Yeah, I don't know if like someone specific actually said the saying, or if it's just been passed around so long, who knows? But that saying of you have to know the rules before you can break them.
Yeah.
I say that to clients, or especially young or new writers, where it's like, hold on, let's understand why those are in place. And then if you have a
Yeah.
good reason for going a different direction, then yeah,
Yeah.
let's give it a try. But they
Yeah.
can be good for foundation, but I
Not,
love the exploration that goes
yeah.
with creative
No, it's very
minds.
true. Yeah. And thanks for saying that. Yeah, I had somebody who I was very influenced by when I was younger, and took a number of philosophy classes from at the University of Montana. Is a wonderful professor named David Sherman. And I remember he always used to kind of, he had his own take on that line you just mentioned, but he used to say the same thing. He was like, the best rule breakers are the ones who know the rules the best. And yeah, it seems a little bit, cliche perhaps, but it definitely, you have to kind of really study things to try to figure out ways to bend new openings. And yeah, if that is happening at any point anywhere in this book, I'm just delighted that I was able to pull it off. So thank you.
Well, and another thing that you did that was a little bit different, don't come across very often, having your main character remain unnamed for the entirety of the
Yeah,
book. So I wanted to ask you about that.
yeah, it's an interesting point. A number of times throughout the process of writing the book, I found myself compelled to give the character a name, and so maybe kind of forced one in there, or even just like a letter for the time being or something. But then for some reason, and I just kind of kept pulling back from that, and I think I felt a bit uncertain about it, but eventually just kind of became very at ease and settled with the idea. And I think I just liked that it left open, for me at least, I don't know, a certain degree of like ambiguity and openness with the character. Not to say that names are these kinds of, fully oppressive and like binding qualities, but there was something was really drawn to about the character not being named. And yeah, it's also, an interesting like the exercise of writing that too across dialogue and different scenes without any address or name mentioned was just like an interesting thing to navigate as well.
I bet. Yeah, I was thinking about that. Maybe I'll have a chance to try it. Previous to deciding to become a ninth grade English teacher, it had been a while since I had taught youth creative writing classes. And I thought of that while I was reading Take Creeks. It was like, this would be an interesting writing experience for students. Write a whole short story and don't give the character a name. How difficult
Yeah.
is that? Because I assume it got challenging at times.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff can become quite difficult. I think the having a first person narrator like the book allows you to ground it and not have any ambiguity with other pronouns because you're using I. But it's still something that I had to just constantly be mindful of, especially like with dialogue tags and in scenes where there were, more than two or three characters, where it could be confusing to know who was talking or who was doing what. But yeah, it was kind of fun to figure out. So
Well, I like that. Yeah, I think I may try that with my students, because that's one of those things that I think, especially for new creative writers, dialogue in general can be really hard. But
yeah, yeah,
figuring out how to avoid he said and she said and they said and he said,
yeah,
it gets so repetitive when you're having
yeah,
an ongoing conversation. And I think that would
yeah,
really push the writer to consider how else can you use the environment or an emotion or something else to identify who's speaking without having to
yeah,
use constant dialogue tags.
yeah. What do you how do you like teaching creative writing? It's not something that I've ever done, and yeah, it's something that's quite remote to me, and especially from like a teaching standpoint. But I imagine it's like a really exciting process too.
It is. It's a lot of fun. And I love working with like young people in creative writing because they're so surprising on what they come up with.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You just never know. You just hope they keep it appropriate for the setting sometimes. But
yeah, yeah,
they they come up with a lot of interesting ways of doing things that for someone like me who's been in publishing for over a decade now, and like I said, I've worked with private clients and through different organizations and stuff where a lot of that with adult writers is focused on the structure and how things should be done. And with young writers, you don't really have to do a lot of that. You can just explore and create and
Yeah.
let them kind of take it where they're going to take it. And
Yeah.
that's so much fun. I really enjoy doing that. And I'm hoping I can do that with my students in the spring, is when we get to talk about narrative English literature and different things. I'm hoping I can get a few assignments in there to give them some room to be creative after I've spent a semester teaching them how to write a structured essay.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, there's so many different forms of writing and stuff. It's a shame that we don't have more, just kind of that it's not more normalized for that kind of writing and other forms of writing and poetry and just kind of non-expository writing to be available to students, I think, particularly when they're younger,
Yeah, I think it's so important for young people to have a creative outlet of some kind, no matter what that
Yeah.
might be. Like, they've got so much inside of them all the time.
Yeah.
And, you're sitting for 6, 7 hours, and that's so hard for young people. It's hard for me
Yeah.
sometimes. And just
Yeah.
having those opportunities to get all of, the emotion and the thoughts and the interesting perspectives and do something with it. Like, I think that's just
Yeah.
such a great way to release some of that energy that gets pent up so much during the day.
Yeah, there's so many wonderful things that just kind of roll out of it and fold into it. And that's one thing that, I think with this book, and it's by no means any kind of a treatise or statement, but many of the characters in Take Creek are characters who, a year or two after the end of the book will be, sitting on $200,000 or $300,000 worth of debt, and that they borrowed all this money from banks and whatnot to go to art school. And that's something that I think is just a real sad and shameful trend that seems to be quite pervasive across a lot of our education system now. And the fact that you have to more or less sacrifice any possibility of financial freedom if you're even in a position where you're privileged enough to have that opportunity. It's just astounding. And it seems like the total opposite of what you're talking about, which is just kind of being creative and exploring and playing around with different forms and mediums,
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. Just I thought about that as well when the characters were discussing, kind of where they were at financially, and I was just like, oh, that hurt to think of coming out with that much student loan debt. And then, I said, I'm a writer. I know it's not what people think, oh, you wrote a book and now you're set.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
A lot of times working in creative arts, it's hard, and the money that a few people make is not the normal for everybody else. And that struck me. And my oldest, we just dropped him off at college, and I had to say I'm really grateful for the programs that exist in New Mexico that have helped with his tuition, because it's my gosh, that's so expensive.
Yeah, New Mexico is so special in that respect for just being so, I don't know, there's just such a strong community-minded spirit across so much of the state that I feel like it ends up resonating with important policy decisions like that.
Mm-hmm.
Even if there's not as much resources available as there might be in some other states, it's providing a lot more of an equitable foundation for a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise have it.
Yeah. It definitely makes a big difference. And my daughter's a senior, and she'll be off to college next year. And so I'm just
wow.
I was thinking of that. I'm oh my gosh, yeah. If that was all on them to get student loans, or me, to figure out how to pay for all that, even with state school, it was wow, that adds up. That's a lot. I'm really glad that there's been some investment in education here
No,
helps a lot.
I completely agree. I completely agree. Oh, I hope it's a wonderful experience for both of them.
Me too. My son seems to be starting to settle in. He's getting used to it, but it's going okay so far, so I'm thrilled about that. But
That's
yeah,
great.
we're getting short on time. This has gone by really fast, but I did want to ask you, what are you working on next? If anything, I know you're probably still in pre-publication, get ready for everything mode, but
Yeah,
yeah, what
I've
are your
been I've
plans?
been I've been learning some of faintly learning some of the ropes of the pre-publication process, which yeah is a whole different kind of experience from writing a piece or even trying to publish it. So I'm just trying to take that in stride, carve out time here and there to keep working on other creative projects. I've got another novel that I've been working on for off and on for a number of years. It started actually before Take Creek and then kind of came back to it somewhat recently and so I'm paused and then coming back to it again. But that's kind of the focal point of like my creative work right now, and then just a smattering of short stuff here and there and ideas for other things, but nothing fully materializing quite yet. But there'll be time as this launch and publication kind of goes out into the world. And yeah, I'm really excited about all of that. But I'm also excited to just sit down and get back to work too.
Oh, great. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that. I know it's hard to find time and go between the two. The marketing side of being an author is a beast and time consuming and steep
Yeah,
learning curve. So I've totally been there. I know
definitely.
how that goes, but just
That's
chip
yeah.
away at it little by little and you'll get it.
Yeah, that's been the advice I've received from a lot of people, and it's so far it seems to all be ringing true. So yeah, I appreciate you
Good.
saying that.
Well, I just want to remind readers or listeners, I always say readers, but I want to remind listeners that Take Creek, for example, is going to come out October 1st, and that's with your publisher 713 Books. And where can people find you and follow what's going on and see if you end up in their area at some point or you
Sure.
announce your next
Yeah.
project?
The book just recently became available for pre-order on Bookshop, and so I would recommend if anyone's interested, either for the pre-order or once it comes out, you can purchase a copy there if you want because it's a great way to support independent bookstores and independent press. As well too, yeah, if you're interested, you can ask your local bookstore or library to order copies. It's available for distribution through Ingram, which has a reasonably wide network in terms of reach across the country in different places. And yeah, I am online. I have a website at chrisrugeley.com. And I also have been sharing news and updates on Instagram as well as LinkedIn about focal things happening with the book, and that'll be where you can find out about events that might be in your neck of the woods or nearby. We're looking at an event in early October on Sunday, October 8th at 1 p.m. at Books on the Bosque in Albuquerque. So if you're in the neighborhood there or nearby and interested, I'd love to meet you and share a word. And also hoping to make an appearance at Prose Month at Somos, the Literary Society of Taos, and that'll happen at some point in November. Still penning that down, and then other things to come here and there. So
Oh, wonderful. It sounds like you're going to have a fun, busy fall, and hopefully you
I
get
think
some
so.
writing squeezed in there as well.
Definitely. Thank you so much. And yeah, I really appreciate all the thoughtful questions and thanks for reading my work and sitting with it. And yeah, thanks for what you do on the program as well. It's a wonderful service to writers across the region.
Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with me. This has been a lot of fun. And yeah, I wish you the best with the launch.
Thank you so much, DelSheree. Thanks to everyone.
Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.